Hey, welcome to Let's Make Our Badge Blink with Blunt. All right. Thank you, by the way, for picking up a Blunt in the Flying Badgers badge. My apologies for taking so long to get to you, but hey, now that it's here, you're probably asking yourself, hey, Blunt, how do we make a blink? How do I make some sound out of this thing? So let's go ahead and do this. All right, I've got this set up so that we've got your brand new badge. I pulled a couple things out of the bag here. I pulled our two cables here. Maybe you can see those, right? So we've got the male and the female end. We're going to need those. You're going to need your battery connector, all right? So your battery holder, I should say. And we've got a little piece of Velcro square in there that I pulled out as well. Probably going to be helpful. All right, some other things to know while we're doing this. Good time to put on your hot glue gun if you have one, because we're going to use that to reinforce where we solder the battery connector to the badge. That's an inherently weak spot if we leave it as just the wire. The wires are real thin, and after you move them a couple times, they'll bust. So we're going to use a little bit of hot glue gun there if you have it. If not, maybe some CA or some glue. I don't necessarily recommend that, only because trying to take the stuff out if you do break and then trying to resolder if you do some kind of glue is not a great thing. So maybe better off using again, some kind of hot glue gun. The other thing I'd recommend, a pair of scissors, right? So I'm going to need a pair of scissors, maybe a little electrical tape, or if you have it, some shrink tube. And of course, a soldering iron. If you don't have a soldering iron, man, you are out of luck on this step, so you're going to have a hard time. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and unwrap our badge. Yay, Scott, let's unwrap the badge. Woo, isn't that sexy looking? All right, so we have one badge here. Life is great. I also have here a couple of pieces that I'm going to go through as far as setting up. Well, let's talk for a minute about the badge, though. All right, so very excited about the badge. Some things to know about as we go on the other side. There are a couple of versions of the badge. One, let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so one of them, if you notice here in this area here is where the voltage regulator is that I had all the problems with, right? So in particular, if you notice this little guy right here, this little guy is the one that's the voltage regulator, the buck boost. And let's talk about that a second. Okay, currently on here, if I put in any voltage up to like 7 volts or something, this voltage buck boost will go ahead and convert it to a steady voltage. Right now, the one that's on there is for creating a 3.3 volt steady state onto the badge. And you know what? That works great. All right, so here's the deal. If you want to just do the blinky on the LEDs and you want to go ahead and just do the sound for fun, this is all we need, right? It's just, you can leave this alone. Life is great. If you want to use that really cool, hey, Blunt, you gave me this add-on board thing, right? This add-on board, right? If we want to use this add-on board, that add-on board is expecting 5 volts. All right, so what we're going to have to do then is we're going to have to go ahead and set this up so that we replace all of these little components here, all right? And we're going to put on this little blue guy, boom, like this. All right, so some of you may already have this. If you see this, what this is this is just it's a built-in 5-volt converter buck boost, right? So the idea is that if I supply voltage to it, it'll take it and it'll leave it to a steady state of 5 volts for the board, which is what I need to use that shield, the add-on board I gave you. If yours has this already, you're great. There is nothing you need to do for that. You still need to go ahead and hook up the battery, but we'll talk about that later. This is for the more advanced boards. When I set up a separate video on this one, we're going to talk about the fact that you could probably use, and I still need to test this, a LiPo battery instead of something like the AA's or AAA's that I'm going to show here. So with this guy, and if you have this in your bag, I am going to show you a separate video on how to install the 5-volt buck boost converter. But for now, we're going to ignore it. Yay! All right, so because what's going to happen is we're going to go ahead and just make it blinky and do some sound, right? So that's all we want to see right now. So what we have is we're going to go ahead and I am going to take my wires here. All right, notice here these, let's zoom back out now that we've talked about that area. All right, so all right, I've got my cables here for my battery connector. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them in about half. All right, if you take them, bend them over to about half. Doesn't have to be exact. All it is there's a little extra wire here we just don't need. So we're going to go ahead and cut those, right? Boom. And I'm going to go ahead then and put the wire to the side, the extra wire. I'll grab the et and put it to the side, right? Life is good. And now we have the two little guys here, which is what we need to work with. I'm going to go off camera here for just a second, and I am going to go ahead and take it so that we can solder these, right? So I'm going to strip the ends, and then we'll come back. I'm also going to tin the ends. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to put a little solder on the ends just because it's better for the connecting, a little easier if we have a little solder on the end of the wires. So I will be going out off the screen here for a second. You won't notice it because the video will continue, but when I come back, these will be actually already stripped and tinned. Okay, so I've just come back and set up for the wires. I've tinned them, I've stripped them. Let's talk for a second about the badge, though. I've got the battery connector here. All right, I've got one that I've actually already connected. But anyway, there are two different sizes of the batteries here, right? I've set this up to work on both AA's and AAA's, but the idea is that it's running on three of them. All right, so 3 times 1.5, each battery is 1.5 volts. It's going to give me 4.5 volts. Of course, the AA is going to last a little longer than the AAA's, but I think the AAA's. Here's the deal: if you got the AA, go ahead and set it up with this. But here's the thing: it's a little big. I didn't realize how big it was going to be. If you're not planning on using the add-on board much, right? So if you're not planning on using this add-on board much, which has the LCD for the eyes, what I recommend is go ahead and you can actually fit this between the header pins here. You have to squeeze the header pins a little bit, just a little bit, right? But you can then go ahead and set it down and set it up for it to fit in there. But actually what I truly recommend is, you know what, throw that away, all right? I would much rather have the AAA version, especially because it fits so nice right there, right? It allows me to still put the idea of the this board on, the add-on board and stuff, right, for being able to get it on, I think. So anyway, I recommend that this is not a bad way to go. Right, so it's a little smaller, a little lighter. I would use the AAA. So I'm going to go ahead and use the AAA here just to go ahead and show what I'm doing. All right. So as we go through this, again, I've already tinned all my tips and stripped all my tips. The first thing we're going to notice is, let's go ahead and move this out of the way a little bit. All right. Which end are we going to use for the battery? Well, here's the deal. If you look closely, let me see if I can pull it up here. If you look closely, let's see, can I get a little light here? There you go. All right. If you look closely, there's pins in the left one, right? So that's the male one. See, yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but there's some pins in there. On the right one here, there are no pins, and the right one has these wings, all right, these little wings to the side. Anyway, by looking at these, what you'll see is, what we're going to do is you always hook the battery up to the female connector. The idea is there's no pins exposed, so you can't short it out. And the badge is going to get the one with the pins, the male, all right? So we're going to go ahead and set that up. So let's put the male to the side for right now. We're going to go ahead and use the female version, all right? Again, the one with the wings here to the side. All right, if you have to think about it, maybe, I don't know, just figure out wings for the female. And we're set it up. Now, one of the other things I like to do is, when I'm setting up my battery, if you notice here, I've got my red and my black, and if you're not used to working with the electronics, red is always positive, black is always negative here. You know, that's the convention. All right, if you've noticed, I've staggered the wires, meaning I've cut one longer and one shorter. And the idea here is if that for some reason, if I have where my tape moves or my shrink tube moves or whatever, I still won't short out the battery by touching metal to metal, right? So I like to stagger. That's just me. That's what I'm doing here. So if you see this, this is what I'm doing. Again, I'd probably prefer to put shrink tube on here, but I'm going to show you how to do it with the electrical tape, only because if that's probably more likely what you have if you're kind of a beginner. And one of my goals is this badge should be for beginners. So let's turn this over here real quick. All right. So what I like to do is I like to come through in between the two, right? I go ahead and come between the two, right? And then I take it and I do a quick little fold on one. All right, so you'll see here, I'll kind of give a little fold on the red. And then from there, I can start to wrap it around and cover both, right? Because now the red's already covered. Now by covering both, I'm good to go. Just do a little bit of an angle here again, so excuse my sausage fingers. All right, cool. That looks like crap, but you get the idea, right? That's the important thing. All right, so now the battery's done. Remember, the battery's the female, no exposed wires. Life is good. By the way, don't do all that with the batteries in there. You can short them out. But that said, we are ready to put our batteries in. So let me go ahead and put our batteries in. Voila, magic. Hey, I swapped them out. All right, so here's what I already had done. By the way, you may be tempted to just solder directly to the caps here. If you do, notice you'll melt that plastic really bad if you're not quick. And next thing you know, you're setting for a trouble of trying to get these things to connect. I don't know if you can see that here, but yeah, don't solder directly to the copper that's shown on the battery holder unless you're really good. If you do it quick and all, you're good. If you hold it at all for any amount of time, it's going to just melt the crap out of that. All right. So back to the badge. Back to badge. All right. Back to Bull from a horrible movie with Goldie Hawn when I was much younger, and you probably weren't born. All right. So here we go. I'm using. It sounds like I'm going to go ahead and use just some of these. If you have any, just because I've got the shitty add-on or the SAO connector on the front, makes it a little tough sometimes to balance things. I'm just using some wire, some braid to be able to stabilize that a little bit so I can actually go ahead and solder that. So actually, I don't need to have the bottom, really, just the top, because I want to be able to solder the top. So let me set that up. All right. So what we're going to do now is get that wick out of the way because it looks bad. All right, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to focus in on a little bit more here. All right. What I want to do is I want to focus in on this right here. This is going to be where we're soldering on the battery connector. Notice this is the big-ass fuse I have, right, with the components. Notice it says Arduino Leonardo. That's for programming it later on. I'll have a whole separate video on doing some programming on the Arduino Leonardo or using Arduino to go ahead and program this badge. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got that idea of the saying, the Leonardo. These two holes here are where we're going to connect the battery pack up to, right? So you've got a plus here, you got a minus. I'll zoom in even a little further so you can see it. You can see here I've got the plus sign on the left and the minus sign on the right. What we're looking to do is set this up so when you put the other end in that we created, the male version, right, we're going to set it up so that the red goes in the positive. We're going to set this up so that the red goes in the positive and the black goes in the negatives. Let's see if I can thread those real quick. All right, good. All right, good. So I've got the black on the negative, the red on the positive. Grab my old soldering iron here, my trusty old soldering iron. All right, going to grab myself a little solder here. Go ahead and solder these. Again, we want to do this so it's nice and clean and we don't meet any type of a bridge or short here between positive and negative. Now notice here it's taking a while to do the negative. That's because I have an entire ground plane here. All right, so there's what that means is that one of the sides of the board is negative, so it's a little larger. Even though I went ahead and set up the pin right, there's still a lot of heat sometimes required to, because you've got to heat up a lot of that board to do that. All right, the other side I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the positive side. Again, prep my soldering iron, a little tinning of the soldering iron, and that should be enough to get me in here and do the positive. Positive shouldn't take as long. All right, I look good. There we go. So, going in and making sure I got no short, right? I got a little cover here, but making sure there's no short. Looks good. Remove that. Doesn't work unless you say. All right, good. So now we can see I look at this point. This is where I like to grab my soldering iron. This is where I like to grab my hot glue gun. Right, and I put a little hot glue. All right, here in the connection point because, all right, again, this is going to be a point of failure if you don't. All right, by putting a little glue here, what I'm doing is I'm reinforcing so that the stress doesn't happen on the soldering joint, it happens on the hot glue. All right, so I highly recommend the idea of the hot glue here to give you a little reinforcement, all right, to be able to work with that. So while that's drying, let me move over here just a moment. Notice here to the right of the fuse, and again, that big fuse where our Arduino Leonardo is, we've got this little switch here, all right? And I want you to look at that switch for a moment, all right? That switch, all right? This switch says the fact that it's FCU powered, All right, so here on the top it says FCU powered, which stands for Flight Control Unit. All right, that's a flight control unit, meaning that the battery power to power the badge, the Arduino Leonardo, the ATmega 32U4, to be able to power the badge to do blinking and sound and stuff like that would come from the flight control unit. All right. This side says badge powered, and what that means is that it's going to power the badge directly from the battery pack we're installing right now. So what I'm going to do is this, by putting it over to FCU power, is basically saying off, right? I don't have a flight control unit in my header pins yet, in the header sockets yet. So there's no power coming in. So this should be, I should have put off here, right? So this should say off, all right? So and you might want to even mark that, right? So this would be off and this would be on, all right? With the idea that for the battery, this is now off. The power, what it is, the power comes through here, through the fuse, over to the switch, and then out to the board. If it comes in from the flight control unit, it comes in from this side and goes out to the board. If it comes in from the power, it comes in from this side and goes out to the board. Anyway, so just so you know the idea. So FCU, consider off. Badge power, we consider on. All right, that looks like that's dried now, so let's go ahead and come out. All right. The next step here before we power this is we want to make sure that we're not shorting out the battery. And what I mean here is when we turn this over, if for some reason, I did this purposely so you can see it, if for some reason, look what happens when we put that positive and negative through. Are they touching? Hell yeah, short, right? That would be bad. So what I'm going to do is, again, notice that the battery is not connected, right? Because if it was connected, I'd be shorting out and electrons would be flowing and making my battery hot and doing bad things, right? Even with the switch off. I'm going to go ahead and grab my cutters. I'm going to trim these flat, right? I like to trim them flat. Boom. Notice when I do that, the short disappears. Life is good, right? All right, good. So beware of the short before you put the battery on. All right, so again. Okay. So at this point, I've got it turned off, but I'm going to go ahead and connect it to the battery pack. The battery pack has a little clasp on it, right? So when you set it up, there should be a little hook and a little clasp. You should actually hear a little click. Click. Good. Again, make sure you're doing this properly because I have no protection for if you go ahead and put the negative on the positive on the negative. Sorry about that. Next version, maybe. All right. Now, what we can do is we're going to go ahead and if you had, again, this is the reason I like the AAA, I would go ahead and cut myself a little bit of that, Velcro, and I would put it on the bottom here, and it would allow me to go ahead and do Velcro to, like, you can even Velcro to the MCU here. There's no problem. It doesn't create much heat or anything, or maybe stack some up around here. But the idea is that you can go ahead and then hold that there so that while you're walking around, life is great. All right, so that's the idea of that. Oh, the other thing that I like to do is if you're planning on flying this at all, all right, if you're planning on flying, I'm just going to disconnect this for a second. All right, if you're planning on flying this at all, one thing to think about is the fact that you wouldn't want this puppy to be flopping around with the blades and getting caught. So what I do is I take it and I put a little Velcro right here on the header socket, all right, right against the header socket here. Right? And then I put some on the actual end of the battery connector, and then I'm able to Velcro it down to the side here, right? It would hold like this to the side so that while I'm flying, the cable is out of the way. It's not going to hit anything. So you might want to think about doing that as well, putting a little Velcro there and setting up. If you plan on flying it, that's a good thing. You can go ahead and do that way. All right, so let's hook it back up and see how this performs. Put the battery connector back on. Battery connector back on. Good. Okay. So if I go ahead and I take this at this point and I turn it over, you're going to immediately hear the post, the power on self-test. Right, and that's going to start with sound. So let's see if we can go ahead and get a little sound here. Get the mic real close and see if we can aim it towards the sound. And then it immediately goes into the test for the lights, right? So the RGB, the red, green, blue, right? And then we're good to go. At this point, you know your badge is working. Life is good. Let's talk about this badge here for a second. One of the things I want to show you is the buttons on the bottom on the teeth. All right, so as we zoom in, we'll kind of come in here. All right, what I'd like to demonstrate to you is how these buttons work. So there are 6 buttons across the bottom. On the furthest right, what this button will do is it will play the tone that is currently set up for the badge. Right there, you hear the idea of just the chord. All right, if I push the button next to it, if I go to the second button, push that, then when I push the first button, Hey, Star Wars. All right. So the idea here is the rightmost button is to play a song. All right. So if you come in here, rightmost button, play a song. The next button changes the song. Now, depending upon what version I burned on your badge for the program, this third button should start a light show. It doesn't. Oh crap! What happened was when I flashed that software, it's the wrong one. What you need to do is go over to GitHub and from the little sheet that I put in the bag, and you'll find the link there and download the latest version of the software and upload it. So that said, what will happen is I'll demonstrate that here in a second. The idea, though, is that the third button from the right would be to play a light show, and the fourth button would be to change a light show. The last button, I'm skipping over one. The last button here, all right, the last button is demo mode. All right, if we push that one, what happens is it goes into a light demo mode, and what that is it cycles through all the different light shows. All right, 2 seconds between each light show to go ahead and say, hey, look at this. This is cool. So as you're walking around the conference, whatever, it'll continually blink. Because if you push the play the button, it only plays it once. All right. So if you push play light show, it only plays it once. So demo mode goes ahead and just plays it forever. It just loops through all of them. So what will happen is I have no interrupts or anything set up, but between each light show is about 2 seconds. So when it goes dark, to turn it off, that's the last button. All right. So the very last button is the demo mode. The button next to it coming in is to turn off the actual demo mode when that individual light show stops. So if you want to stop the demo mode, this button will do it. All right. So let's see if I can go ahead and do that. We'll wait for this rainbow to stop. Cool. So holding that button down does stop the light show. So there you go. That's how that works. Again, I want to thank you for buying one of the flying badges from Blunt and the Flying Badgers. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate your patience in going ahead and waiting for the badge. We believe it's worth it. Go ahead and watch for the next couple of videos. I'm going to be doing everything from how to change out that voltage regulator buck boost to be 5 volts so that you can use the eyes, to installing the eyes. I'll go ahead and show you how to set up for flight as far as putting the motors on and setting up your flight control unit. There should be plenty of videos still to come, so please feel free to go ahead and check those out. And again, we thank you for your support and patience.